If I was starting photography again in 2025, I wouldn't waste time stressing about what the best gear choice is. I'd sidestep the biggest beginner mistakes that I made, and I'd focus on the things that actually get results. Here is exactly what I would do. Firstly, I wouldn't worry about gear. By far and away, the most asked question I get in DMs, in comments, in emails is, can you recommend what camera I should get, or what camera should I buy? And in truth, I just don't know. And I think far too many people spend far too much time worrying about what camera they are buying and if it's the best choice for them. And it really should be quite a simple process. Most cameras made in the last 5 years are completely adequate for the majority of types of photography. If it was me and I was trying to pick a camera now, I'd probably look for the following things, which I deem to be most important. If I was starting out, I'd probably want something with interchangeable lenses for flexibility. I'd want something with decent autofocus. I would absolutely want a camera with in-body image stabilization, and ideally something above 25 megapixels in resolution, just so you've got the ability to crop into things if you want to later on. But most importantly, I picked something that I found enjoyable to use, because that is the most important thing with the camera you have. If you don't like using the camera you have, you're not going to use it. And if you're not going to use it, it's completely pointless. And this is why I find it such a hard question to answer. I don't know what your preference is for the kind of camera you want. Only you can know that. And a lot of the time, the only way you can find that out is by having one in your hands and testing it out. Maybe this is something you go to a shop to try or borrow one off a friend, but I cannot stress enough the importance of actually having a camera in your hands and using it before you commit to buying. I'd probably also buy a used camera rather than a new camera as well. And you can get some absolute bargains on 3 or 4 year old cameras now. And people who buy cameras generally keep them in pretty good condition. There are so many places where you can buy used cameras now that offer added protection. I'm pretty sure you already know where they are, so it is worth looking at rather than buying a new camera. This will also leave you more money for trips away or lenses, and I'll come back to lenses later. Secondly, I'd try and learn the fundamentals as quickly as possible and not worry so much about maybe more advanced techniques like blending panoramas or long exposure photography or fancy stuff like the Brennizer method that I tried to learn when I first started out. Basically, it's taking like a 50-shot pano with an 85 1.2 portrait and merging all the images together to get a massive image with really low depth of field. Look it up, it was all the rage 10 years ago or so. To me, there are 3 essential components of a good photo: composition, lighting, and subject. How you frame a shot matters so much more than the camera that you use to frame it with. So if you spent your time learning about composition and the rules of composition and when to break the rules of composition, rather than researching the latest cameras, you're already going to have a head start. I think you can have a shot with good lighting and of a good subject that is completely ruined by poor composition. So to me, this is probably the most important thing. And I get it, it's hard. It takes a long time to learn composition. But eventually you take that many pictures that it kind of becomes second nature and you do it without thinking. I wish I'd paid much more attention to this early on so I could get to where I am now with composition a lot sooner. So then learn about light, learn about the different types of light, how light impacts scenes and subjects, how light changes depending on the weather and the seasons and the time of day. The best way to go about this is just get out and about with your camera and just pay attention to light throughout the day, wherever you are, and how it changes different scenes. The only way you can do this is by experiencing light. You can't get used to this concept through YouTube videos or anything else. You just have to see it with your own eyes and understand how a camera sees light as well, because that is very different how your eyes see it. And then on subjects, just look for interesting things that tell a bit of a story and make you ask questions. I did a video a bit about this a few months ago, which I'll link here. And this is basically the one rule that I follow when I'm trying to photograph stuff. Is it interesting? If something doesn't make you think, then no matter what the composition or the light, it's probably not worth taking a photo of. As well as forming an understanding of these three components, you also need to build up an understanding of how your camera works and how to expose properly so that you can record these things happening as you see them. So learn about the exposure triangle and how ISO and shutter speed and aperture all interact and the impact that changing one has on the others, because this is fundamental to your success in the future as a photographer. I'm not going to go into it now because there are so many videos out there about the exposure triangle, but this is probably one of the first things you should look into. The important thing to remember though is all of this just takes so much time. You need to allow yourself to take bad photos for as long as you need to. But just remember that every experience you have when you're out with your camera is building towards becoming a better photographer and taking better photos. I know it's hard to think that you're not improving when you look at your work compared to everyone else's, but this is a really important thing to avoid, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. So go out with your camera as much as possible because that is the best way to learn. As I said in this video that I put out a few weeks ago, I tried to learn by actually learning and just watching videos all the time. I was always worried that I didn't know enough, so learning as much as I could was almost like a safety net. And this was just a huge mistake that honestly hampered my progress for years. I said I'd come back to lenses before, and composition's probably one of the things that beginners find the most difficult, and something that I've found over the last few years that has really helped to improve my composition is just focusing, no pun intended, on using a single focal length, because getting used to that focal length will really make you think about composition differently, and in turn it will improve it. So my favorite focal lengths to use over the years have been 35mm and more recently 40mm as well. I feel like wider than this often leads to more complicated scenes which are harder to deal with compositionally, and longer than this, maybe 50mm, 70mm and beyond, whilst can be easier from a compositional point of view. You can simplify scenes a lot easier with these longer focal lengths. For me, it just removes my connection with the subject, which is why I don't tend to use them as much. That is a completely personal choice. If that's something you like doing, then maybe your composition will improve quicker by using a longer focal length. The third one is to try and work out what you want from your photography. Photography can be so overwhelming. There are so many genres and types of photography, and loads of great photographers' work to potentially be swayed by. I think in my first year or so, I tried macro, landscapes, wildlife, street, motorsport, portraits, weddings, and various others as well. I know it's really tempting to give everything a go, but I think it just left me feeling a bit confused about what to shoot and just hampered my progress in any of those areas. You might need to go through this process to work out what you want your photography to be and what you want to shoot, but I've got a suspicion that you probably already know. Away from photography, have a think about your interests and what you like to do on a day-to-day basis and how you spend your time. What books, magazines and TV shows grab your interest? If you love hiking and the outdoors, then probably concentrate on landscape or adventure photography. If you're fascinated by natural history and wildlife behavior, then I'd suggest you probably look at wildlife photography. Looking back, I think I knew I should have concentrated on landscapes and the outdoors and finding little out-of-place things on my adventures, as that's when I was at my happiest. I just didn't pay enough attention to it and went at photography like a bull in a china shop. Find and concentrate on what you enjoy, and I think you'll make progress a lot quicker. Fourthly, learn video. I know this isn't for everyone, but I really wish I'd started to film things when I first picked up a camera. Firstly, you already have most of the gear that you need to start doing this. And secondly, so many of the skills are transferable from photography to filmmaking. Now, not everyone wants to make money from photography and creating with a camera, but if you do, you're going to struggle to do it without knowing how to do video as well. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many photographers have diverted into making videos for YouTube. Even if you don't want to make videos like this, then knowing how to film going forward is so valuable. It's valuable for documenting your life and the life of people around you, for rallying against AI and the cries of this isn't a real photo. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I approached this in last week's video. It can open up a world into hybrid storytelling where you're combining images and video to show a story of a place or something that's going on, and it can lead to potential freelance work further down the line as well. Learning video not only gave me another skill set, but it also future-proofed, in theory, what I can offer to clients and to an audience. I also think it made me a much better photographer. It improved my composition, it improved my storytelling, and I just wish I'd started it from the beginning. I guess I was already disadvantaged by video not really being at the forefront in 2008, but this is if I was starting now. The next one is find a community. This is something I did pretty early on, and honestly, it was one of the best things that I did. I found a group of like-minded people that I could talk to about photography. I learned from them. I had my work critiqued by them, but most importantly, we met up at least once a year for little photo trips. I say photography trips. It mainly involved drinking rum in a wooden camping pod until 3 a.m. But it was still a valuable experience. And without that little community, I honestly don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing now. So quick shout out to JT, Paul, Nick, Paddy, Mark and Tony. I feel like communities are easier to find than ever before through social media, through YouTube, through Reddit, and even through forums. Remember them? And I think that might be something I'm lacking at the moment. I love what I do and I've got a lot of people I can call on and go on photo adventures on. But in reality, 90% of the time, I am just sat here in this office on my own, and it's a bit shit. So if you're a photographer, filmmaker, YouTuber, creative, whatever, and you're in sort of South Manchester area in the UK, let me know in the comments below, because I'm keen to build a network of local people that do similar things to me. And we don't have to go out shooting all the time or anything like that, but if we just get together for a coffee and just do a bit of work together, you know, it beats being on your own all the time. I think there's a really important thing in that. Next one is about earning money. There seems to be a lot of doom and gloom about the photography industry at the moment, but casting my mind back, I don't think that's really changed much over the last 10 years. And I still think it's a fantastic place to make a living if you're clever about it. If photography is something you're serious about, why not make a YouTube channel about it and document your progress from the start? It doesn't matter that your photos and your videos are bad, but they'll get better every week as you progress. And I think having that journey enshrined in beautiful 4K for not just you, but your potential audience to look back on in years to come will be really valuable. It's an off the bat comparison, but basically Mr. Beast did the same thing. He started releasing videos when he was a kid and he was totally terrible at what he did. And he just kept doing this. And if you now look at where he is, all of that is stuff that he learned by committing to the process. And it takes time to be making money from YouTube. So you don't want to be waiting to start until 3 years after you start photography and then waiting another 3 years before you see any money from it, for example. If YouTube isn't for you, then there are plenty of other ways to build audiences and connections that one day you might be able to make money from. Whether it be selling prints, courses, photo shoots, video shoots. The earlier you start showcasing your personal brand, the quicker it will be before you start earning from it. There's something I wish I'd started so much earlier than I had, because I believe doing this is the future for me and my business, and I'd be so much further down that road had I started when I initially wanted to. But instead I let fear get in the way, and I've spoken about that before. It is a difficult thing to do, but the only way of getting past that is by going through it. I think what you've got to remember though is that this is hard. There's no shortcut to it. And you've just got to keep doing it. And I believe that if you do keep doing it, then one day you will be rewarded for it. The final thing is my favorite topic, and that is building a photography mindset. As I mentioned about earning money from it, becoming a better photographer is all about keeping going. There is no quick path to this. It's tedious. And you have to have an incredible level of patience, unwavering consistency, and a desire almost to make mistakes and learn from them as you go. Any resistance to any of these things will slow you down. Believe me, I know. There are so many things I can mention in this section, but in short, if you keep your mind in a good and positive place with regard to photography, I feel like you'll go places quicker. Concentrate on improving and enjoying the process, and don't worry about social media validation or comparing yourself to what other people are doing. Everyone's journey is different, which makes documenting it even that more important, in my opinion. Something a lot of photographers do is compare themselves to others on social media, and we quite often are bombarded with the best videos and the best images, and they're automatically the ones that we pull out for comparison. But that'd be like me comparing my football skills to Cristiano Ronaldo's and saying, oh, well, why aren't I as good as that? I don't know why this is a thing in photography, but if we compared ourselves in other areas like we do in photography to other photographers, it'd be really weird. Like, we don't compare ourselves to the best sports stars and the best singers and the best actors and think, well, why aren't we as good as that at that thing? And why we allow ourselves to do this as photographers is quite puzzling to me. And I'm not having a go at anyone because I do this as well. And it really doesn't make sense why we are as harsh to ourselves as we are. All it does is drag us down. So we need to try and kind of push that aside and just focus on getting better. Over the last few months, I've talked a lot about how mindset plays into being the best photographer you can be. And it is probably the most important thing you can concentrate on to affect all of those other aspects that I've talked about. The videos that I've made are potentially more important than a video about a piece of gear or a technique or something you might learn. And to make them easier to see, I've put them all in a playlist, which is linked here.